Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Alana James. I'm so glad some people are joining us for the first time. And today we're very excited to welcome Dr. Stephanie Galindo, who comes to us with a broad range of backgrounds from online universities, helping students navigate the challenges of writing and what to put it where and professional development. And so we're very excited to have her join us today. Stephanie, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alana. Okay, this webinar is on editing before hiring an editor. It's a little bit about APA shortcuts at the end. And the contents that I'll go over today is, first of all, why to edit yourself before hiring an editor, why to dig into the minutia. We'll go over some information about page numbers, deleting and modifying certain information, anthropomorphism. I can't say that. I'd never even heard of that word before I did a dissertation. Updating resources, spelling, grammar, and phrasing, and then some information on APA shortcuts. So first of all, why edit if you're hiring an editor? And it's simple that the more you do, the less you have to pay someone else. I found that every time I tried to edit, I started reading my paper, and then I would get lost in the paper and get nowhere. So a methodical approach to proofing your own work saves a great deal of time. It'll help you avoid getting caught up in reading your paper over and over again, because you're going to go through this list and just look at one item at a time. It enables you to improve your understanding of what others are looking for in your paper, and it provides an opportunity to be objective regarding the quality of your presentation. So after completing these steps, you'll know, and it will feel good that you know, the quality of your presentation is going to be improved. The people that you hire to be an editor are unlikely to be familiar with your thesis or dissertation guidelines of your school and whether those differ from APA. So since editors focus on APA, you're the best person to mitigate the issues that may come up between your dissertation guidelines from the school and APA. You'll have to look at that yourself when you get your paper back from your editor, or let them know in advance if there are differences that you're aware of. The timeline for hiring an editor is important. You need to allow yourself at least 2 weeks for doing this editorial process before you send your paper to a professional editor. And I'm basing 2 weeks on the assumption that you probably have other things going on in your life besides school. You may be working, or you may have family, and allow at least 4 weeks then for a professional to edit your paper. Have someone lined up in advance and ask for an estimated timeline, probably based on the number of pages or number of words in your paper and the number of authors in your reference list. That'll give them an idea of, to give you a quote about the time it'll take. Then allow 1 or 2 weeks to review their edits after your paper is returned to you. And this is because a professional editor can make mistakes. They may misinterpret something you're trying to say and correct your grammar or sentence structure, and the meaning will be different from what you intended. So I actually recommend that you keep a copy of your own paper, that the one you send to them, put it up side by side with the one you receive back, and go through it page by page to make sure that your intended meaning is still conveyed. Editing does not require reading your paper, and this is really important. You've probably already read it so much that you can hardly even focus on the details anymore. So the first 12 steps of this editorial process do not require reading your paper, and in fact, I don't want you to read your paper while you're doing this at all. This is the time you'll fine-tune, you'll look at extremely specific details, and go through your paper only once for each specific detail. You go through it multiple times, but you're only looking for one thing each time. And you'll probably want to do this once or twice before you graduate. So the first thing is to discuss is page numbers. You probably already know this, but citations are evidence used to create a strong argument in support of your position. And the credibility of your evidence is important. So if you represent an idea as your own, or even summarize, paraphrase, or reference an idea that isn't your own without a citation, this is called plagiarism. So accurate citations are critical, so that others can check your presentation of concepts against the original concept. And the dates and page numbers direct the reader to your source. I see a question from Hannah, can you upload the handout? I believe Alana is going to do that at some point. We have only a small handout for the APA information, and I guess at the worst case, we'll do it at the end. All right, I will attend to the questions as I come to natural stopping points, if you would post a question here in the chat area. So my approach to page number, PowerPoint slides. Alana, do you do that too? Sorry, this is my first time. So my approach to page numbers is that I like to insert page numbers everywhere in all citations, even though they're not required. And why I would do this is because as you go over your work and arrange and rearrange and copy and paste over months or sometimes over a year, the page numbers enable you to go back and review the original content and make sure you've conveyed all your information accurately and in the right context with regard to the author's meaning and your own. So if you wish to use page numbers throughout in order to facilitate knowing exactly where the information is that you got when you're writing your paper, you should ask permission of your chair or committee supervisor or tutor, because it isn't APA protocol to use page numbers everywhere. So your committee needs to understand your purpose, or else you'll get negative feedback. And you probably should remind them every time you submit a draft that you're keeping those page numbers in until the very end. And likewise, when you hire an editor, don't let your editor remove the extra page numbers until the final review. I had 2 or 3 edits on my dissertation and did not let them take them out until the end. Okay, so the task with regards to page numbers is your first editorial task is to go through the paper and only look at citations. There's 2 types of citations, narrative and parenthetical, as shown here. Narrative is where you state the author's name with the year in parentheses. Parenthetical is with the author and the year in parentheses. So you run a search on the paragraph symbol, you will come up with all your citations, one at a time. And in each citation, you look for these 5 items. Are the page numbers and dates of publication accurate to the text? Your editor can't help with this. They don't have the books, so you have to make sure this is right. And I would suggest you just go through and check every single reference, because you're going to find mistakes. Are the page numbers inserted where they're required according to APA? Do you need a paragraph number or a table number or a slide number that you forgot to include? Can you use the word, check your use of the word "and" written out rather than the ampersand when referencing the authors in either narrative or parenthetical format, because sometimes when you copy and paste, these get switched around and you might spot an error. Correct the spelling of author names and all punctuation in a citation. So you go through one by one, searching on the paragraph symbol, and look at every citation for this information. If you find yourself reading your paper, stop. So this part, information only, on task number 1, quotes are generally handled in a couple different ways. I'm going to do this part first. General quotes leave off the period until the very end of the sentence. Block quotes, the citation comes after the last period. So, and in these quotes and in every citation, you're going to have some page references which are a single page and some which are double, and they're written differently. So you do a search on the P just the lowercase letter P with a period after it, to make sure that your page numbers are properly cited in each citation. So you go through your paper once, just searching on the P period, and make sure you did them all right. And again, it's because it's so easy to mess this up. The next section is on deleting and modifying information. So this is task number 2. You'll run a search in your paper and look for the following 4 items one at a time. First, you search for exclamation points, and you'll change them to a period, unless the exclamation point is part of a quote. You search for an ampersand and make sure it isn't used in a sentence. Search for words like and change to such as. And when talking about your paper, rather than saying in this paper or in my paper, you would normally say in the current study. So search for those key phrases and make them more professional. And some of this sounds repetitive, but it's also a different way of finding similar errors in your paper. The third task is about time. Instead of saying within the past 10 years, give the actual years, be precise. For example, write out 2010 to 2020 or 2005 to 2015, rather than writing in the past 10 years or the next 10 years, because someone reading your work in 2023 would otherwise guess wrong. So do a search on the word past and review your context, and then do a search on the word next. And if you find where you've written something like the next 10 years, write it out, like 2020 to 2030 or 2021 to 2031. Here's that word I can never pronounce. Anthropomorphism. This means the attribution of human motivation, characteristics, or behavior to artifacts or animals or natural phenomenon. For example, a report includes information displayed on a piece of paper, in a slideshow, or described in a news broadcast or in a table. It doesn't state anything. It's inanimate. The author of the report is the source of information. He or she provides the information being discussed. So rather than saying the report said or the study concluded, you would write something like Johnson in 2020 stated or predicted or reported or concluded, whatever. So the task is to go and do a keyword search in your paper for words such as report or reports, state, states, forecast, forecasts, concludes. Words like this should be changed from present tense to past tense. Reported, forecasted, stated, discussed, and concluded. And while you're doing this, you will find where you may have used anthropomorphism. All of your writing about literature findings should be in past tense, because everything you're reading was done yesterday or further in the past. So change any other words that you might have used in the present tense, whatever comes to mind while you're completing the task. So next, this is a little more complicated, updating resources. If you can live without citing an older text, you should probably think about eliminating it. Why? It's expected that newer authors have done a great deal of research prior to writing their books or articles in peer-reviewed journals or conducting studies, just like you're doing. These authors would have examined and discussed any relevant older texts. In fact, you can say so-and-so in 2012 reviewed 120 texts written between 1954 and 2008 on the subject. And generally, you would only keep the older material itself if it's the first critical work by an author in the field, or if you can really use the data, the theory, the interpretation, illustration, or innovation as it was presented by the original author. Or you may want to demonstrate a transition or a trend in the author's thought from the first publications to a later date. In those cases, it's great to cite earlier sources. But if you have older material, Beyond 10 years is usually the rule, but you can check with your committee. If you have older sources of material, you might want to try and replace them. So the way to do that is this. First, you look in your reference list alphabetically and do a search by author for the oldest work cited in your paper. You may have everybody in your reference list. You can just check the list. Search for dates in your paper year to year to identify older publications. Like right now, anything over 10 years old would be 2009 or older. So go as far back as the oldest author in your reference list. Say your first author wrote something in 1984. So you go from 2009, do a search in your paper for 2009, all the way back to 1984, year by year, and see what comes up. If you only cited an author once or twice, how important is that citation? Can you eliminate it completely without, taking it away from the important arguments in your paper? Is there a newer edition of the same book or a newer article by the same author on that subject? If so, it's very likely that the author wrote a similar chapter or section in the newer work. Sometimes new comments in the new book are identical to the comments in the old book. So you may only need to change the year and page number to update your reference list and your citations to include the newer text. First, you have to get the book and make sure that it's the same. But you can also learn if the author had a good reason for changing their mind or evolving their trend in thought. This brings your whole paper more up to date. So when reviewing newer material, watch for anything interesting that might be relevant to your research questions. Then the next task, search your paper for the year, such as 1999, of the oldest author in your reference list and bring it forward up to date through 2020 to make sure all the sources that are in your paper are included in your reference list. Because believe me, some can get left out of your reference list. And then you do the reverse. You search all the authors in your reference list one by one, alphabetically by name, to make sure they're still discussed in your paper and you didn't accidentally or intentionally eliminate someone that's still left in your reference list. So these two tasks are very important. 3 tasks, actually. Again, if anyone is referenced just once or twice, you think about eliminating them. The next section is on spelling and grammar. Click. Okay. So even though Word shows errors underlined in red and spelling in blue for grammar, red for spelling and blue for grammar, you need to run a spelling and grammar check and look through it item by item just to catch something that you may have missed. This is especially critical if students are writing in English when it isn't your native language. Be sure to run one more spelling and grammar check before sending your paper to a special professional editor. Then the last tasks, the APA cheat sheets. I covered the 6th and 7th edition because it's my understanding the 7th just came out, which I have here. And the 6th, though, may still be authorized for your use depending on your school, so you'll have to check. You probably already know. So refer to these pages in the APA Manual 6th edition, and what page is shown up here if you're still allowed to use it. And make sure that your university thesis manual doesn't take precedence over APA. If you have a version of the 6th, a version of the 6th edition other than the paperback version, which is what I use, then the page numbers below on this handout may be off, but you will find the same information there. So here, you will go through your paper once for each item on the list. You check the heading levels, make sure you've done all your headings okay. You check quotation marks, and again, you can search on these. Page 171 to 172, quotes in text and electronic sources. This will help you make sure you get your sources right. I see a question from Adrian. How would you suggest we keep track of how we have advanced our argumentation throughout the dissertation chapters and improve it in a holistic manner? I'm going to save that question for later because it's complicated, and I wasn't really prepared to speak about argumentation. This is more about content, and this webinar is more about the minutia of editing. Maybe I'll let Alana handle that when we get to the end of the webinar. Thank you, Adrian. So you will go through the 6th edition check your references, check how you use secondary sources, the DOI number, reference types for your reference list. Make sure that your APA is as good as you can make it, and anything that is too confusing, you just leave for your editor. Types of references such as translations and online media, and how do you cite those in the reference. So you'll go through and just correct each of these things, make sure they're as accurate as possible. For the 7th edition, I am using, as I showed you a minute ago, the spiral bound 7th edition. So if you had, let's see, which way do I turn this on here? That way. Okay, if you're using a different edition, different version of the APA manual, 7th edition, page numbers again may be a little off. I like this one because of the tabs. It actually made it really easy to correlate between the 6th and 7th one. I updated. So you go through your paper one time for each item on this list if you're using the 7th edition. Again, you check heading levels, make sure they're all accurate, quotation marks, secondary sources, paraphrasing and quotes, no page number or other issues that might occur in your text or in an article, or if it's on the web in particular. A table of contents has in this edition has all kinds of reference types. And then below, references, DOI, types of references, reference examples, and online references. As you can see, I wrote index page 418.0. You can use your index in both of these manuals. It can be very helpful for finding the exact information you're looking for. If you have a question as you're writing, you can say, how am I supposed to cite this online article or webinar that I've been watching? And you can use your index in your APA manuals to try and find the right spot where they give you that information directly. So, let me see, did I put that up there? No, here we go. I put on some of these, when you get your handout of the PowerPoint, I put up at the top, the 6th and 7th edition usually, where you can find certain bits of information like this, primary and secondary sources as cited in. So when do you leave off the year of publication? This is a fairly tricky one, and it has changed between the 6th and 7th edition. So here again, you will search on the parentheses to check each paragraph with citations. The first time an author is mentioned in a paragraph, you have to include the year. That hasn't changed. As long as you discuss the same author in the same paragraph without any other authors in between, then you don't need to repeat the year. If you return to the initial author after referencing someone else, you must once again cite the year. And this is an example. I've used color here to make it a little easier. Early in the 21st century, Brian in 2011 said this. And then we talk about Brian again. We don't have to repeat the year. Then we talk about what Dr. Kritsky said. He's in blue. And then go back to talking about Brian. So once again, we need the year here for Brian. Hannah says, what if the same authors are from different years, 2 different publications with the same authors is what you're saying? You do need to follow the same protocol if they have different years. The idea again is to make sure that if anyone wants to follow your research, they want to look for this information and verify what you said or read more about it, then they can go to the exact source that you did. So you would say Bryman 2011, then you go to Bryman 2018, and then back to Bryman 2011. So it works the same way. Did that help? Oops, wait, come on. Yes. Okay, task number 11, block quotes. You would visually look through your paper and review your block quotes. As you know, they're indented. When a quote is 40 words or more, it's called a block quote, and it's indented. So you can kind of see where it is as you go through your paper page by page. A block quote is the only time you do not use quotation marks, and that the citation comes after the period at the end of the quote. So this is what you're going to check for to make sure you've done your block quotes correctly. As you can see in the end of this sample, which is intended to be 40 words full of X's, there's a period at the end of the sentence, at the very end of the paragraph, and then you have the citation after that for block quotes. In Hannah, it says in APA 7, how do you cite multiple sources from the same authors from different years in text citations? I would have to look that up to give you a precise answer, but I think I would have to look that up to give you a precise answer. Author 2017, 18, 19. That may be correct, but you may have to write out the author's names. I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. This book is too thick for me to memorize it all, but I will look for that and find out for you. I'm just making a note here. Okay. So the next task is to look through your paper and review your, okay, let's do this. Let's see. Adrian says, what if there are 2 or more researchers in my field that share the same last name and have written papers I would like to cite in my own study in the same years? Usually if there's researchers, I think they use A and B for researchers with the same name. If there are 2 papers in the same year, it would be 2017A, 2018B, 2017B. You know, I'm going to look that one up as well, Adrian. 2 researchers, same year, same name. Different first names. Good point. If they have different first names, you'd be using a different initial. I'm going to continue. Rod Ellis and Nick Ellis. So you'd have Ellis R and Ellis N. Alphabetically, N would come before R. So that's how they'd be listed in your reference list. And in your paper, you'd have Ellis R and the year, and Ellis N and the year in the citation. So visually, you look through your paper at your lists and review your lists. It can also be handled like a block quote of 40 words or more. It's often easier to read a list that looks like a list rather than listing numerous items in a paragraph with commas. The aesthetic choice may be up to you from what I can tell in the APA manual, but I would recommend you minimize short bulleted lists and use paragraphs instead. But if you have a lot of items, then you go ahead and create a bulleted list. And there's a link on the screen right now which gives you APA styles examples of all different kinds. You may be able to find some of these questions answered there as well, but I will look them up. The last section is summary and phrasing. Actually, I think there's a section after that. So this is just a little table I put together that you can kind of use as a checklist, perhaps. Page numbers, citation page numbers, you search on the parentheses and on and, the ampersand, spelling and grammar, check sources for accuracy. These are just lists of things to make sure that you get them done. The next section is on phrasing, which is a little bit different because that would require a little bit of reading. So it's your choice if you want to do this now before it goes to an editor or if you want to do it afterwards. Alana has written, Hannah, your question depends on whether there is more than one author. So Flo J and Simon Q wrote something. So it would be Flo and Simon 2018, both names. I'll let this conversation continue on the side and finish this up. So this is the last task you can undertake before you send your paper to an editor, or you can do it later after you get your paper back. You would read your paper to eliminate inappropriate phrasing. For example, if there's speculation, conjecture, or if you express hypothetical opinions, sometimes it's okay. So you just have to be careful about this. Sometimes it's okay to imagine and use your opinion in stating conclusions, but mostly you want to stay factual. So I would try to keep this very objective. If you express opinions, you have to take credit for them clearly, that it's your idea. If you wrote something previously, published an article or wrote something in a school paper that you want to reference, you have to cite your own work properly with your own name. You need to avoid tangents going off on extraneous streams of consciousness. Sometimes when you're researching, you can get off into a subject that sounds really relevant and interesting, but you have to go back and focus yourself on your research questions and make sure that it really is relevant and it's just not some fascinating extra area of interest that has crossed your mind, because you don't really need to do that, especially in a student dissertation. It's just very important to stay focused, because you can easily make this your life's work if you keep studying all the various facets of the issue that you're discussing. So you want to stay very focused on your research questions and very focused on the answers that you're specifically pursuing in this project. And something else that you find may be fascinating, but it can wait for another project after you graduate. So just stay focused and don't try to include too much. Avoid colloquial phrasing and slang as well. And that is really the end of the presentation. I can see Alana's busy in the conversations section here. So would you like to conclude, Alana? Did you have some information to share on some of these questions?
Coming up in the chat was author singular or plural, and as I remember, one of the changes with APA 7 is a change with the et al. Problem. So in APA 6, and you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, in APA 6, as I remember, it was author's name and then up to 3 authors the first time. And then after that, you went to author et al.
Right.
And in APA 7, it went to author et al. From the very beginning.
I think you're right. I remember seeing that in the 7th.
Yeah, I think that makes it a lot different. So Hannah's been trying, I've been trying to tease out with Hannah what she was after. Her confusion is she has one author who has written many years of something, and probably that author is saying something tangential to the point she's making in everything they write. So that's author A.
I'm just looking this up now, and this may be what is meant. If you have two sources by the same author in the same year, using lowercase letters A, B, and C with the year to order the entries in the reference list, and you use the lowercase letters with the year for the in-text citation, such as shown here for 1981 A. That's what I was thinking.
So that's one author, multiple documents in the same year. She's got one author, multiple documents over a course of years. And Hannah, I'm not quite understanding why you would ever say authors S, because it would always be, am I right, Stephanie, always the author's name. So you don't put an S on the end of an author's name. So it would always be the author's name and then comma and then the years.
Here's the answer. Here's the answer. Yes. If you cite multiple, I'm getting these from Purdue University, by the way. If you cite multiple works by the same author in the same parenthetical citation, you give the author's name only once and follow with the dates, which is, I think, exactly what she had said.
Exactly. So it's author's name, whatever that name is, and then date, comma, date, comma, date, comma.
Right.
Perfect.
So you were right.
Perfect. Okay. And multiple works, same authors. I think that's clear. And we think we've got it. All right. Good. I think we've answered the chat.
Did we answer the chat? Does anybody want to say another question, or did we get something, miss anything?
What I liked about, as they're typing, what I liked about what you were saying that I want to tease out a little bit more. I really enjoyed the idea that you're going through this list of things to do and you are not reading your document. You are looking for the issues one by one.
Right.
Now, does the editor read the document, or are they back from it all? And that'll lead us into.
It depends. I've seen both. I hired several editors when I was doing my dissertation. I think it was 3 different. The first one was a complete train wreck.
And why? Why was it a train
wreck? They didn't catch things they should have caught. They rearranged wording, and I did not want them editing my content at all. You know, I'm pretty fluent in the English language. My content stands. I wanted it edited for APA. So the second one that I found did APA and did a great job. And I think people can't help but read a little bit. So they weren't being as methodical as this. And there were comments about, for example, if I made a statement and forgot to include an author, you know, where's your source? So that was important too. And those comments I really appreciated very much. That was essential.
Okay. So
and I have that person edited the 3rd time as well.
Okay. So then do you recommend that the person bringing the work has some parameters or a discussion with the editor about what they want so that it goes more smoothly from those 2 stories?
Absolutely. A good editor should ask questions too and not make assumptions.
Okay.
About what you're looking for.
So if you're not getting questions, you should be prepared to start the conversation.
And I might add that the first time I got it edited, I went to a firm online that claims they do editing. It was, like I said, it was a complete train wreck. It took a long time, wasted a long time. over a month of my time, and it was horrible. And when I sent it to an individual, a person actually who I was referred to through my doctoral committee, a person that I could work with one-on-one, that really made a difference for me, and I would still recommend her to this day
Yeah,
because she was,
I totally agree. I totally
yeah,
agree. This is not a place for machine learning. This is
right.
not a place for they're going to read it by machine and then they're going to add a few things. Not going to
I
be
don't
helpful.
think they did it by machine, but it was a company that was they had their editors, I guess, that, and I tried to look for referrals, but I just was completely dissatisfied with their output. So you have to be really careful. Maybe send a sample first and
Ah,
see how they do, so you can see if there's someone you can really work with, because I really think there needs to be, communication and engagement with an individual, not with just a company.
I agree. And I think also a small bit to see how it goes. And Erica is asking whether you'd recommend an editor experienced in their field. Her field is very finite.
Archaeology,
Archaeology with satellite remote sensing. So
that would be awesome if you can find somebody that's in your field because they understand the technological language and they may have a better idea of what you're trying to convey. And that is a really cool field. This is a side story. I don't know how much time we have, but my dad is a PhD level programmer engineer who worked on well, he kind of invented phased array antenna technology and dish antenna, dual phase reflector antennas, and they did a project on the space shuttle where they did remote sensing down into the earth to look for ancient structures, and he had to rewrite the software so that it could differentiate between different densities underground in order to define these structures better that the scientific equipment was picking up. It was really cool. So that's a really, really exciting field. Gives me chills thinking about it. So yeah, I would recommend if you can find an editor, somebody that in your field, that would be even better. But if not, get somebody who can focus on the APA.
So, just because always we want to make sure that people know what else is available. Fabulous that you came to this webinar. And I'm sharing my screen now. I want to make sure everybody knows the importance of opting in for these communities. So if you sign into your pd.education site and you go to up here at the top, you go to whatever your site looks like. This is the general one. You go over to the far right-hand side near your account where it says resources. The very first thing, opt-ins, and the first 6 opt-ins are communities. Why is that important? It's important because this year we will do our best to make sure that if you want an academic writing community, that you will get the notice from Big Marker when anything has to do with academic writing, or an open office hours focused on academic writing. And because we invite you that way, fingers crossed we can make this technology work. But then we're hoping that all those people will get the recording. So we're twofold. We want to cut down on long term on the number of emails you get to make sure you know all the things that are going on, and we want to make sure those who really want it always can have the recording. It's a new upgrade in the way we're using technology, so bear with us. But the first step is for you to show us what's important by signing into the communities. And then, of course, you can always go to this link. I'm going to put it in the chat, and that will take you to this page just to tell you what's coming tomorrow. Anybody who's in the room who is starting to do research, a webinar tomorrow on how to kick it off so you are on the right track, you understand what you're getting into and how to go through it, and you have lots of tools to help you avoid the rabbit holes that can come when you're when you're designing research. And then we have the support community conversation this week is for the grad support group. Might be difficult year for some of you. Might be a year when you're working more remotely than you're used to. Might be facing issues that are more personal than and difficult. And your deans are very concerned about you that way. So the grad support community is going to look at isolation. It's part of the doctoral work anyway, but this year it might be part of more people's concerns. So big open office hours, little bit of conversation about what we know about isolation, and then people in the room being able to share and ask questions and get support and ideas from each other on what works. We also have Monday the 5th, Monday 15-minute research boost. And on Monday, October 5th, and then project management and is coming up as a topic a week from Tuesday, and there will be a pre-proposal office hours as well. Hope you're all doing really well. Stephanie, back to you.
I was just looking at Hannah's question here about let's see, go back to that. Figures and tables in submissions. Do you put insert table 1 here in your paper when they ask you to submit your table separately? And then she said they said to follow APA 7. So this would be my guess, because I don't know what the specific journal would want, but and my guess is when you submit your manuscript, you keep your table in there where it belongs so that the manuscript is whole in its entirety. And then you submit a separate copy of tables and figures, like a JPEG or something. And maybe that is so they can get the, high resolution, and they may want to adjust it in when they're putting your paper into their journal format. So I would submit your paper as a whole plus the tables and figures as separate files. That would be my guess.
That's been my experience.
Publishing, but I've worked a lot in with publishing other types of materials.
That's been my experience. And the last book chapters I had that kind of a system where I had to submit things off to the side in certain quantities. The thing to watch for is when they send you, if they send you a proof that they've done it right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes electronic systems don't put the right thing in the right place.
Yeah.
And I insert table here is another way. So Hannah, when in doubt, you can write the editor.
Yeah. I would just ask them
a way to submit questions.
Yeah, usually they're really good at getting feedback and making sure that you've done it right, because it's less work for them if they talk to you on the phone and than if they get something submitted incorrectly.
Yeah. Yeah, they good. Well,
or an email.
If we don't have any more questions, thank you, Stephanie, so much for coming. I know you also have a thank you for everybody for coming.
Yes.
And your email is up on the board. We've given you actually an email at pd.education. So Stephanie at pd.education, and your people will be able to get through to you. And I'm sure there'll be other questions that they have about this whole topic of conversation as they dig more into their work. Adrian, last point on your question about working on your argumentation all the way through. I would say it's the same for anyone. If you're in the pre-editing stage, make use of your comments. Make sure that you can figure out a system where you can track what you want to do and annotate your document And then separate from that, once it's annotated, once you're solid with it, then you go through Stephanie's list and you get all the little fine points that she's brought to our mind. Stephanie, I really appreciate this idea of one step at a time. Don't think about it, just do it.
Yeah, definitely. That's search and replace, basically, or search and edit rather than reading. And it's actually kind of a relief to do it that way because you've been reading so much.
Yeah, exactly. So you have more that you're doing. You're doing another one next month, yes? Another
Yes,
webinar for us?
yes, there's another one. Let me see, what was that one on? That one is going to be, oh, that's for people who are early in the process. Let's see, which one did we do? Are we doing the one on interview design? I believe that's not for early in the process. It's for midway. Interview design, recruiting, and pilot tests. It's actually a much heavier webinar than this one was. It's pretty dense, a lot of information in there.
About qualitative work. Just really digging into
Yes.
qualitative work.
I am not an expert. I actually worked with a statistical expert who could run the software and coach me on how to analyze the results. But I am nowhere near expert on quantitative research. But my study was a mixed method. So there was, but the qualitative part, you can design an interview that has quantitative and qualitative sections, and that's what I did. But I needed help with doing a statistical analysis. You can analyze the results qualitatively. You don't have to do a complex statistical analysis. You can do a very simple one. So that's what I would focus on in that next webinar, which I think is, October 12th, I think.
Good. Okay. Bye, everybody. So glad you could come. And we're going to close off the recording now. Let me just say goodbye. Well, and we hope to see you again later on this week for starting the research or the grad support community work as well on dealing with isolation if that's something you're facing.